Today, we're diving into something pretty heavy. It's about the AI tools so many of us are using every single day. We kind of trust them to give us answers, right? But a brand new investigation is revealing a really, really dangerous blind spot, especially when it comes to questions of, well, life and death.
Okay, before we go any further, I need to read this next part exactly as it's written. It's incredibly important. This explainer discusses suicide. If you or someone you know needs help, the U.S. National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7 by calling or texting 988. So that brings us to the big question, the one that kicks this whole thing off. What actually happens when you ask an AI for help in a real crisis? I mean, think about it. In a moment when you're feeling completely vulnerable and you turn to a chatbot, what do you get back? Is it helpful? Is it safe? Or is it something else entirely?
Well, as it turns out, the answer to that question is, honestly, it's just deeply alarming. So here's the headline finding from an investigation by Live Science. Popular AI chatbots, they can give detailed, direct answers to questions about suicide that experts consider high risk. We're not talking about vague, unhelpful stuff here. We're talking about specific, direct responses to incredibly dangerous questions. And look, we're not talking about some random, obscure AI model nobody's ever heard of. The investigation looked at the biggest names in the game: OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and Anthropic's Claude. You know, the ones that millions and millions of us are using, maybe even every single day. This is a mainstream problem. And we have to be crystal clear about this. This isn't just a technical problem in a lab. The stakes are literally life and death. The study's findings were published on the exact same day a lawsuit was filed against OpenAI. It alleges that ChatGPT actually coached a teenager on methods of self-harm. It puts this whole thing in a tragic, very real-world context. So how did we even find out about this vulnerability? Well, it all started with a formal academic study, one designed to put these AI models to the test in a really systematic way. Let's break down how they did it. You see, the whole goal for these researchers was to get past just stories and one-off examples. They wanted to create a proper, standardized safety benchmark. You know, a reliable, repeatable way to test these chatbots so that anyone, whether it's the developers themselves or outside watchdogs, could see exactly how these systems are performing when things get serious. And they were really thorough about it. First, they came up with 30 different hypothetical questions. Then, they brought in 13 clinical experts to consult. Those experts categorized every single query by its level of self-harm risk. And finally, to make sure the results weren't a fluke, they tested each chatbot 100 times for every single question. That's some serious rigor. So how did they judge the answers? It was actually brutally simple. It came down to one thing. Did the chatbot give a direct response, meaning it just answered the dangerous question, or did it give an indirect response, where it refused to answer and instead, referred the user to a crisis hotline? The difference there is absolutely critical. One provides potentially lethal information, the other provides a lifeline. And the results, honestly, they are just staggering. For questions that those clinical experts flagged as high risk, ChatGPT gave a direct, harmful answer 78% of the time. Let that sink in. 78%. Claude was not far behind at 69%. What this shows is that the safety filters on the world's most popular chatbots were just consistently failing, right at the most critical moment. But believe it or not, this story doesn't actually end there with the academic study. Journalists at Live Science saw these findings and thought, okay, can we push these chatbots even further? And just like the original journalists, we have to be really, really clear here. For obvious safety reasons, we are not going to share the specific questions that were asked or the detailed, dangerous answers the chatbots gave. Our whole goal here is to explain the problem, not to make it worse. Okay, so this is where things escalate. The original study found that chatbots would directly answer high-risk questions, which is bad enough. But what the Live Science investigation discovered was even more disturbing. It turns out, with just a few initial prompts, a little bit of conversational coaxing, the chatbots would start answering questions that the experts had labeled as very high risk. That's a category the original study found the AIs would normally avoid. The study's lead author, Ryan McBain, actually explains exactly how this works. He says, and I'm quoting here, "I can walk a chatbot down a certain line of thought, and in that way, you can kind of coax additional information that you might not be able to get through a single prompt. It's that back and forth that creates the vulnerability." So what this really shows is the fundamental weakness here. The very thing that makes these AIs feel so human, right? Their ability to have a conversation, that's also what makes them so vulnerable. It lets a user basically talk their way around safety measures that just clearly aren't strong enough. This all brings up a really important, maybe even uncomfortable question. Why are people even turning to an AI with these kinds of issues in the first place?
It might be easy to just dismiss this, but we really have to try and see it from the user's perspective. What is it that's so appealing about confiding in a machine about something that is so deeply personal, so painful?
Well, the expert, Ryan McBain, he gives us the answer. He talks about this architecture where people feel anonymous, but also a sense of closeness. There's no judgment, right? No stigma. In that private digital space, it can feel safe to ask the absolute hardest questions. So he says it's completely unsurprising that people, especially younger people, would turn to them for emotional support. Okay, so we have this massive safety failure. What are the giant tech companies behind these powerful tools actually doing about it? And maybe more importantly, is this even a problem that can be fixed? Well, the official responses are, let's just say they're varied. OpenAI basically acknowledged the problem, saying their systems don't always behave as intended and that they're working on it. Google pointed to their existing safety guidelines, saying their models are trained to recognize risk. And Anthropic, the company that makes Claude, they didn't respond to a request for comment at all. And get this, here's the real kicker. Even after OpenAI rolled out its newest, supposedly safer model, GPT-4o, Live Science tested it again, and it still gave direct answers to high-risk questions. So whatever they're doing, it isn't solving the core problem. And that brings us to a pretty sobering conclusion. This isn't just some simple bug that a programmer can go in and patch. It really seems to be a fundamental architectural challenge of conversational AI. How do you create something that's helpful and conversational, but also completely 100% safe? That line between providing information and providing harm, it's just dangerously thin. And that leaves all of us with this final, unavoidable question. As these AI systems get more and more woven into our daily lives, as they get more persuasive, more human-like, who is ultimately responsible for their words? Especially when those words lead to tragedy. Is it the user? Is it the developer who coded it? The giant corporation that released it? There are just no easy answers here.